Welcome to another edition of the Dynasty LoG Dynasty Cast. I'm your host, Jordan. Been doing this show for a while now, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit. This is just a Dynasty fantasy football channel for my friends. We have a Dynasty League, and um, this is our first year. We just finished up our first year. It was super fun. Um, you know, People made a lot of trades and made a lot of moves. Just really enjoyable. People really took to it, and we kept doing this channel, doing kind of team audits, things like that, looking into how people could improve their teams. And I had people on the show to um, just talk about the game and how they're enjoying it and what kind of moves they might be making in the future. They've encouraged a lot of trading really quickly after the first year. I'd say it was very successful. I'm happy with how everything went. Um, but what's interesting now is we've got a lot of teams with picks that are all over the place. Some people don't have their picks at all. First year dynasty, kind of going all in, and others. We had a few tankers, such as myself. Trading all our picks for future player, or trading all of our players for future picks. And I think it's interesting now what people are gonna do now that we have our first off season. We're gonna have our draft sometime in July, which would be fun. First rookie draft, first time people are scouting players. This is only my second year playing Dynasty, so don't think that I have some crazy knowledge here. I'm not a big college football guy in general, so please, don't take my advice here as anything more than just a guy looking on Reddit a lot and watching a lot of YouTube and highlights and things like that. So my college football expertise is not great, but the draft part is pretty fun. I had my first rookie draft this past, the last off season, and I really enjoyed, scouting the players and things like that. So I'm looking forward to everybody in our league doing that. I think that's going to be super fun. And I was listening to so for today's show, I just wanted to kind of go on about an idea I heard in another podcast. I'm a big Orlando Magic fan, which is tragic. I don't even know why. I guess Penny Hardaway was my guy back in the day. Um, but I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about the Magic, and they were talking about how it's kind of a big off season for them, and in terms of, or a big trade deadline. They should be making some moves at the trade deadline to consolidate some talent. And one of the players that came up is Bol Bol. And if you haven't heard of Bol Bol, you should just look up highlights of him this year. He was amazing. But what's interesting about Bol is he's a very polarizing player. He's can be a force on offense sometimes, but he also turns the ball over a lot. Just because he's so tall and can dribble. But guys swipe it away. Lot of turnovers right now. And then on defense, he's struggling to find his way there on defense. He's not just like his frame doesn't work out for guarding smaller guards, and bigger guys can kind of bully him in the paint. So he's kind of needs to find his place in the league. Anyway, he's a guy who's had a big year. He was looking like the most improved player in the NBA possibly for a little bit there. Although Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is kind of running away with that. But in this podcast, they were talking about Bol and whether the Magic could kind of like sell high on Bol. And which is crazy to think about. He's just starting his career. really it's taken off in a good way in Orlando. So like selling him right now seems crazy. Um, and they might be right. They might be right that this is the highest value you're going to get for him. And I think people think a lot like that in Dynasty with players. They're always thinking with their, is this guy just a flash in the pan? Do I need to sell him now to get the best return? Like basically like we're on Reddit Wall Street bets here. Um, and then so the podcast kind of dived in a little bit to I could link it on this video, but I don't think a lot of people are Orlando Magic fans out there, so not wouldn't be that interesting. The podcast kind of dive into like, what would a team give up for him, and kind of the economy for Bol. And I think that's actually pretty fascinating and applicable to kind of the offseason for a lot of people in our league. Um, what is the economy for your players? Um, and it's very dependent on the teams in the league, right? Who wants these players? And every league is different. Every dynasty league is different. Travis Kelsey might be on a contender for some teams, might be on a rebuilder, and that's a completely separate situation for what you want out of whether you even want to trade the dude or keep him for this last kind of ride. Um, and so yeah, they talked about kind of the economy of picks. Would the Magic take a first for Bol, like a late first for Bol, even though he's starting to kind of pan out because he doesn't really fit the roster anymore. He's not getting minutes, things like that. And I think it just kind of showcased how difficult it is to make a decision to sell your players. Like when do you sell your players? You sell them high, quote unquote, or do you miss out on them? You know, really blossoming into something awesome. Um, and who buys that type of player, right? Like does a competitive team go out and get Bull? And really expect him to contribute to winning basketball if he can't play defense. But enough about Bull. I wanted to talk more about kind of pick economy in our league. And one thing that's been really fascinating to me is watching our best buddy Waldrop here. I've got his team up on the screen just so you guys can see it. Um, and it's over in this left column here. This is a guy in our 14 team league. He is one of the people that kind of went all in this year. Beginning of the year, he trades Travis Kelsey for like 3 first-round pick, or trades for Travis Kelsey with his 3 firsts. So he had no firsts to start the whole year, which is crazy. It was a way overpay in terms of value on any trade calculator like keep trade cut. And it almost won him a championship. It did. This team almost won a championship, kind of fell short at the end. If I were to put the age here, you would see all these guys are pretty old. If you're familiar with the roster here, Dak's like 29, I think, at least. Yeah, Chubb is 26. Dalvin Cook's 28, 27, 28. Aaron Jones is 28. Keenan Allen's 30. Mike Williams, 28. Godwin's 26. This is like the youngest, most viable player right here. Chris Godwin is the only guy that probably has several years left of very good football in him of this whole group. A lot of that's like running backs. They die off really. Or die off is the wrong term, but they peter out. They're not scoring at a high level. They're not featured after a certain amount of time because they wear down really quickly in their careers. So guys like Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones, when do you sell them? It's similar to our conversation earlier. Do you sell them now when they're performing well and they're still worth something, or do you let them kind of rot on your team and lose value? Um, that's a pretty tough decision. Um, and I think Alex is going into this off season. Waldrop, he's going into this off season with some really big decisions to make and some really interesting decisions on how like he could rebuild his team, or if he just goes for it again. So one of the things that happens in Dynasty, if you guys don't know, is after your rookie draft, at least on Sleeper, you immediately get picks for like the third year, the third year out. So you replenish your pick pool for 2026. You get your picks in this case. This is a 2023 rookie draft. Um, and so once our 2023 picks are over with, we finish our draft. We'll get 2026. However many rounds of rookies you draft. In our case, 4. Right. So we'll get a first, second, third, and fourth in 2026 once it's over with. So with a roster like this, you have a pretty big decision to make on whether you go all in and you say, okay, I'm gonna trade my 2026 picks even and try and meaningfully improve this roster and try to win a championship. Now, keep in mind, he almost won a championship. This is one of the best teams in the league on a points per game basis. And a lot of these guys, we don't, we're recording this before the combine and before free agency, so we don't know some things about some of these players, and I can get into each one of them. But this is a fascinating offseason for Waldrop here. Does he trade those 26 picks, or does he try to just trade for rookie picks in this draft? Does he trade for players that are young that could help him rebuild and retool? Now, one thing I'll stress is you don't have to go all in one way or the other necessarily. That you can retool every year. People like to call it that, retool, like selling maybe one older player or something like that. But what we've got here is a team that is heavily skewed towards about to be out of the league age, like that old, right? And that's kind of terrifying from a dynasty standpoint, because if you just, and we've talked about this a lot on our show, but if you just take each one of these players and add 2 years to their age and expect them to perform on the football field, the most of them are not, I would say. I think it's a fair statement to say that almost all of this roster is worthless in 2 years. And what's scary is Alex doesn't have his picks at all. He doesn't have his 2024. He doesn't have any rookie picks this year in the first or second or third round. I think he has some fourth round picks. And then next year he doesn't have any picks. 2025 he doesn't have any picks. So he's waiting until the end of the 2025 season before he gets to draft a rookie again. And do you grab from that even more and try to win? Like, what do you want your next few years to look like? I think any way you go, there's a massive rebuild on the horizon for this team, right? There's a massive rebuild. Whether you want to do it, starting next year or get a jump start on it now is really the question. And so I wanted to take a look at, the economy in our league for these players, because I think that's an interesting concept. You'll see people on Reddit say like, oh, I traded Dalvin Cook and got a mid first for him, or I got Jameson Williams for Dalvin Cook, like, and a lot of people say, well, not in my league, like, well, it all differs for each league. You have some contenders and you have some rebuilders, and people are gonna have different risk tolerances, right? Some people are very trade averse, and what's really interesting now is we know where all these rookie picks are exactly and who owns them in 2023. So if Keep Trade Cut says someone is worth a certain pick, like Travis Kelsey being worth a 106, well, we know who owns the 106. We know it's Lewis, and he's a rebuilder, and he's probably not giving you the 106 for Travis Kelsey because his team's not a Travis Kelsey away from winning, right? So so you have to start doing the calculus here in your head of what can you get from certain players? What assets does everyone have that you can acquire to improve? Um, and so if we were going to kind of go that route, if Waldrop here decided, I need to sell the farm here, I need to sell it and just get a kickstart on my rebuild. I'm afraid that it's not going to be that simple this year. Um, there are a lot of good players here that could help someone win a championship. So I could see someone, paying a nice future amount of picks or something like that for like a group of these guys, like a Kelsey and a Chubb and Chris Godwin. Chubb, Kelsey, and Chris Godwin are the three most interesting assets on this team. Aaron Jones is also interesting, I would argue. The rest of it, not so interesting. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, very replaceable. There's tons of wide receivers that can do what they do. But Aaron Jones might have one more year left of being really productive. Running back one kind of separates your team from the rest of the teams, kind of guy. Dalvin Cook's kind of fallen off a little bit, and I'm more worried about Dalvin Cook in terms of just his yards per carry. I think are down, and he just doesn't look like his old self, anymore. He's gonna have to split carries with somebody a little more than the timeshare he had this year. So you maybe look for the Vikings to go out and get somebody either in free agency or the draft. Maybe they go with free agency and sign somebody cheap. I think Madison is a free agent this year. So he could be out the door and looking for a starting job of some sorts, although I don't think he's anything particularly special in my opinion. That's just me, the guy who watches some, games and and knows just enough to be dangerous, I feel like, but mostly just dangerous to my own team. Anyway, so I guess the point is, there's a handful of guys that are interesting on this team, that are good trade pieces, and those are pretty critical to any sort of retool here that Alex wants to do. Um, and and so now the economy kind of comes into play, right? So I've kind of started down the path of well, Travis Kelsey is worth a 106. Well, you're not going to get the exact 106 for him, so because a rebuilder isn't going to pay that likely. So what about the teams ahead? In the 105 or the 104 spot. I also think those are unlikely destinations because both those teams don't trade very much, and they're really looking forward to these picks to help their team, especially in the running back area. And this is a loaded running back class. This is a great opportunity for them to go in and grab a running back and do well. And anything after that, like I just don't see a team or anything like 103, 102, 101. I don't see teams paying that much for Kelsey, because that's you're giving up a top 3 rookie in the draft for a guy Kelsey that might play like one more year of football. I mean, Kelsey's got a short leash here. I mean, a shelf life here of maybe one more year. If the Chiefs won the Super Bowl this year, we're recording it before that, Bengals Chiefs game. Um, I could see him retiring even, and just getting into podcasting because he's really good at that. So there's a lot of risk with a guy like Travis Kelsey. I think people are going to wait until the offseason to really make a move for some guy like that. The true NFL offseason, I mean, and free agency and all that jazz. um, so maybe you can get picks further back from the 106 and kind of sell low compared to a trade calculator. But those kind of picks aren't going to win you championships as much. You might hit on the 108, the 109. But I don't even think the 107 to 109 in our league, just knowing those teams are going to give those picks for Travis Kelsey. Now, I own a 110, 111. I don't know if my team is one Travis Kelsey away from competing. I might have to grab a couple of these guys if I wanted to compete. If I were to talk trades with Alex here, but it's a possibility. So like the 110 range, I'm not going to deny that as a possibility. I know the 112 is definitely in play for a guy like Kelsey or Chubb. But then you're talking like the 12th rookie in the draft. So is that really worthwhile? A worthwhile return? Um, so that's tough, and a lot of these guys are valued in that same area, right? Like all these guys, in fact, are valued in the same kind of area. Kelsey's the only one that's worth a more kind of premium pick when you think about like the 106 still feels pretty strong. You could get a guy like Jordan Addison or Quentin Johnson, or if JSN somehow gets a bad landing spot, I could maybe see him landing there. And that's what I was thinking about for this column here. What's the best long-term choice for Alex's team? He could grab himself one of those guys, one of those young wide receivers to start building his team around. But this is fairly grim. I'll say that again. I think that's just the thought process. What do you do? Do you actually want to sell for these later picks in 2023? Do you want to sell these guys, and just take a random shot on a player, in the 10 to 12 range, or later second rounders? This is a deep draft, but I just don't think you're going to struggle to get a superstar with those picks. More often than not, you could get like a flex play with those guys. And who knows by the time you're competitive again if those guys are even useful to your team. And I think that's really the interesting part here for Waldrop is he has to think about if he does trade his players for picks, what does that do for him? Does he just trade those even? Like when does he get a superstar on his team? And he's going to have to wait until 2026 if he holds on to his picks. If he holds on to his picks, then he's going to have to wait till 2026 to even draft a rookie for his, and earn something for his awful record that he will surely have if he blows up his team. So, maybe he could draft a QB of the future if he trades for like a second round pick here. Maybe he could get like a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young, and maybe he at best sells and gets a Jordan Addison or Quentin Johnson. I don't think that's on the table. I don't think this 106 is on the table because of the economy of our league. So at best bet, he's getting like a Kayshon Boutte, Josh Downs kind of guy with his rookie picks in 2023. Or I've added this value adjacent wide receiver, which really this exercise wasn't that useful because there's so many picks in the same range here that you end up getting the same wide receiver comps for the pick or for the player, 1-for-1 trade. So basically what this column is saying is like, okay, if I traded Dak Prescott on keep trade cut, what kind of wide receivers could I get for him? And I picked a low range and a high range here. And so in Dak's case, right, if you traded him, you could probably get Kadarius Toney. He's valued lower, and I think a little bit lower from Dak. There's kind of a weird range there where there's not too many wide receivers. And I'm picking young wide receivers here, team players that are going to be on Waldrop's team for a long time. So, because that's what he needs. He needs guys that are going to still be viable in 2026 if he ends up blowing his team up. Which is just fascinating. So on the high end, Bateman is worth more than Dak on keep trade cut right now. Nah, it wouldn't be a bad return. I own Rashad Bateman. I'm not trading him. I own Kadarius Toney as well. I'm not trading either of them for Dak right now. So that right there is what I'm talking about with the pick economy thing. You can look at the keep trade cut and say, okay, yeah, Kadarius Toney, that should be an easy get, but like the team you're trying to trade with might not need a quarterback. You have to find a team that has a young player that you like, and a QB. So what, and needs a QB, has the same needs. So that's really, really ridiculously tricky. So I guess, kind of to close out my thoughts here on this team, one option that I'm not presenting here. So I'm showing you, okay, you blow up your team and you get 2023 picks. Okay, you blow up your team and you get wide receivers or you get QBs. Also, I should totally mention Travis Kelce. You're not getting anything in the Jameson Williams to Drake London range. Just not happening in our league. Those guys are valued way too much to get a Kelce. I don't know how Keep Trade Cut has that as an option. I'm just not sure what team has drafted. Maybe there's a team that has drafted Jameson Williams. They'd be willing to give him up for Kelce to go at a championship, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find many leagues where that's the case. Anyway, so one kind of possible option here is to think about your team's value spike. When are you going to be when is your team going to be useful? Like competing is the word I'm looking for here. When is your team going to be competing again? And in this case, this roster is done for soon. Got to make a move at some point, whether it's this year or next year. So whenever you start your rebuild, I think it's going to take several years to be competitive again. I think that's just a fair statement. So are 2023 rookie picks really the thing to stock up on? First of all, at the time of a rookie draft, rookie picks are ridiculously expensive because everybody is, they've got rookie fever. They've started their scouting and they're like, oh my gosh, everybody's undervaluing Keishawn Butte. I got to go get that guy. And that's true. I mean, you're going to be able to sell. This is probably the best time to sell a rookie pick for a vet. This is the best time. You get some serious value in terms of vets this time of year. But that's not the direction we're going here in this exercise. This is, we've got a lot of old players and we're trying to sell them and for picks. So you're going to have to, people have got their favorite rookies. You're going to have to take a hit on value when you trade these guys. So it's really not a great time to trade for 2023 picks. Maybe you get where I'm going here, but future year picks might be a great option. And I'm not trying to solve problems for people in my league. I'm just trying to theory craft here, about what the best thing is to do with a crazy team like this. Let's say, you get this team. It's an orphan team, which for everybody in our league, like basically, let's say someone leaves the league. You need to find a new owner. That's how Dynasty works. Hope nobody leaves our league anytime soon. But that's like what we call an orphan team. So somebody leaves and you pick up this team and you're like, what the heck do I do with this year? And I think a lot of people would be tempted to ride it out one more year and try to win. But if someone were to rebuild, I think the smart move would be to trade for future picks, like 2025 picks, 2026 picks. I have a hard time believing that the owner here of this team is going to go that route. But 2026 picks from contenders, other contenders, might be a way to really jumpstart this team in the future, because those contenders are going to fall off, right? They're a lot of the contenders in our league are older, skewed towards older rosters, right? You're gonna see in whatever league you're in rosters that look like this. Um, and a lot of times this is an extreme. Okay, I'll just admit this is an outlier compared to any other league I'm into um in terms of age. But a lot of competitive teams are going to have some collection of these players, these types of players on their team. Hopefully not to this extreme where you have this sort of extreme situation. Um, but yeah, I think to me the smart move would be to stack up on future picks, kind of be bad for several years, and like really explode later on. You could also trade for your picks, whoever has your future picks in this case, and that might be a good way to acquire superstars. But people know this about your team. When you look at this team, you know that it's done for here pretty soon. So what kind of value, what's in it for someone who owns your future picks to even trade them back to you if they can see the writing on the wall here? Sure, maybe 2024 this team finishes, gets sneaks into the playoffs, but it's possible these guys start slowing down. It's very possible these guys start slowing down. God forbid Travis Kelsey retires after a Super Bowl. And then the real advantage of this team is completely gone. Um, that's really the advantage in a 14 team league. This is such a huge advantage, Travis Kelsey, that he's gonna command some interest from people. From and he's also, because he can win you the week by himself. If all your guys have an average week and Kelsey has his average week, you're destroying them, scoring 5 or 6 more points in the tight end slot than other people. So I think this is a fascinating exercise, like thinking about the actual economy here. Maybe future picks are the answer. I doubt that's the way we go, and I assume this team is going to mortgage their future uh, even more in 2026. Those that and just to think about that scenario, let's say you go in and you're like, I'm going to trade my 2026 picks for somebody to help this team. Sure, you can do that, and that pick would be valuable, and it'd be valuable to a different crowd, right? Like a competitive team isn't going to be that excited to grab your 2026 pick because it's not going to do anything for them for a while. But a rebuilder might be happy to wait and see this whole thing explode in fiery flames. And so that 2026 pick could be worth a whole lot to them, and they might be able to give up something decent for that. Now, I've tried to go through my head and in our league and think about who would trade players for that. Like, what's the best player you could get for that 2026 pick? And I feel like maybe like a George Pickens or from Zach, or like Traylon Burks. You might be able to grab a Traylon Burks if you just threw all your picks at Lewis. But are those guys enough to help you win a championship? Are they better starters than some of these guys, or is it just better to ride it out and not trade those picks? Okay, but you could maybe get a running back, and we'll see what happens with free agency. There might, some rebuilder might luck into a starting role with someone on their bench, and you could trade, your future second or something for that, and that might be a better move than anything. But keeping your first would probably be a priority with a team like this, because 3 years from now, we're not these guys are all retired. And that's just how it is. Godwin's probably still playing. Anyway, it's a fun exercise. Hopefully this is interesting to you guys too. Sorry I droned on about bowl for so long, but got to throw my magic in there every once in a while. So good luck to everybody in their draft prep. We'll have more mock drafts coming soon. Like and subscribe if you want more content. And thanks for joining us.